And good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Paulo with PG&E. Welcome to this Public Safety Power Shutoff public briefing for October 26th for the event that's currently underway. Tonight, we're going to hear from Scott Strunfeld, our meteorologist, on what's in the forecast for tonight and into tomorrow. Our head of operations for this event is Mark Quinlan. He's going to provide details on where we stand with restoring power. And Vanessa Bryan is a manager of our local customer experience team. She's going to talk to us about the resources that are available for our customers who are without power at this hour. I'll note that we also have some members of the media on the line with us tonight, and once we've given our operational update, we're going to turn over to them for a couple of questions for our folks. Want to remind our reporters to please press *1 to get into the queue to ask questions. And now we'd like to start with a brief overview of where things stand at this hour. As expected, we have been seeing some very high wind speeds over the past 24 hours or so, some of the strongest of the season, in fact. Gusts of up to 89 miles per hour were recorded last night and into today, and we do expect continued high winds in some areas into tonight. Scott will have more details for us on that shortly. Now, of course, the winds are not the only factor that's posing a risk right now. They're combined with extremely low humidity, the record dry vegetation that's on the ground, and also severe to extreme drought in many areas. So taken together, these conditions do pose an increased risk of damage to our electric system and the potential for wildfire. This is why we took the last resort step on Sunday of shutting off power to more than 345,000 of our customers. Now, these customers are in targeted areas of 34 counties and 17 tribal communities. The wind event that is now passed in some areas, we're able to start to restore power now. And as of this briefing, about 95,000 customers have been re-energized at this hour. The remaining 250,000 customers will be restored between tonight and tomorrow evening as the weather clears and we're able to inspect the lines for damages. Mark's going to review those details with us in just a few minutes. Finally, I do want to emphasize our continued commitment to supporting our customers. You know, we certainly know that being without power is a hardship, and so we're offering a number of resources to help throughout this event, and Vanessa Bryan will talk to us a little bit more about that. Initially, we've opened 106 community resource centers throughout the affected areas. We've also provided batteries for medical devices and partnered with local food banks and community-based organizations to offer further assistance. So for now, I want to thank everyone for your patience and your understanding as we work to keep our customers and our communities safe during these severe conditions. And with that, I'd like to bring in our meteorologist, Scott Strunfeld, to tell us a little bit more about what we're seeing out there now and what we're expecting to see overnight with the weather. Scott.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay, and good evening, everyone. So kind of as expected, this weather event was quite extreme and critical. You know, last night we had this upper level weather system that was dropping east of our territory, and that's just the classic setup for a Diablo wind event. Right now, that upper level weather system has dropped south. It's more over Southern California, producing a strong Santa Ana wind event down there. And overnight, when this event was transpiring, members of my team that are staffed during the overnight were monitoring the conditions and did record some pretty extreme gusts out there. And so looking at my wind gust table here, we saw, as Lindsay mentioned, a gust up to 89 miles per hour in Mount St. Helena. And then just reading off down the list, Napa recorded a gust of 82, Contra Costa we saw a gust of 74, Placer County 73, Lake County 71 miles per hour, Alameda County 66, Santa Clara 65, Santa Cruz 59. And so I can just keep reading down this list, but I hope you get the picture. This was a very widespread, very strong wind event, the strongest of the season. And it brought in a ultra dry air mass. I mean, we saw relative humidities with this event, and even relative humidities right now are down into the single digits. I've seen some readings out there down to about 3% relative humidity, which is just absolutely bone dry. And with that really dry air, what that does is really, you know, evaporate some of the moisture from the fuels and make them more susceptible to any ignitions, and also contribute to those fuels contributing to a large catastrophic fires. And so it's just, you know, very, very extreme conditions still out there today, even though in some areas the winds have subsided. And so today, my team and I were heavily involved in monitoring those conditions and looking at when those winds relaxed in certain locations in our territory. And we help facilitate many what we call weather all clears to begin the patrol and restoration process. In some areas, we were unable to do that, and that's because we do expect a second round of winds tonight. They don't look as extreme as what we saw last night. However, the fuel moistures are drier. This is the second day that some of these locations will experience very low relative humidity. So actually, even though the winds have come down, the kind of fire potential index has come up. And so some of these areas that we do expect a return of winds would be in the North Bay, primarily over some of the elevated terrain, Mount St. Helena. If I'm looking at the weather stations, and I can look at my map right here, we're already seeing winds starting to pick back up. So there's a wind gust right now in the North Bay near the geysers, gusting above 40 miles per hour. And Mount St. Helena is already gusting near 50 miles per hour with a relative humidity of 5%. So conditions in some places in our territory are still critical. Other portions in our territory where we still expect winds to rematerialize tonight would be pockets of the East Bay, primarily around Mount Diablo and further south in the Diablo foothills, and then also a small pocket in the East Bay, as well as a portion of the Santa Cruz Mountains, maybe mostly focused on the peninsula, as well as in the northern Sierra. There's going to be some very strong winds happening along the Sierra Crest, as well as in Butte County down the typical Feather River drainage. And so some of these areas, it's not safe to issue the weather all clear, but we do expect overnight and into tomorrow morning, especially tomorrow morning, winds to subside. And as soon as it's safe to do so, we'll be hawking all of our weather stations. We've got 900 of them out there installed, and we're also looking at the couple hundred RAWs and National Weather Service weather stations as well to issue those conditions as soon as we can. And so that's kind of how the event looks and how it's shaped up. And then looking out in the future, what does the future hold? Essentially, we see that we will have a ridge of high pressure building over California. It's kind of coming from the Eastern Pacific and will park itself over our neck of the world. And essentially, it's just going to be, kind of warmer than normal and drier than normal. We don't expect any significant rainfall for the next 10 days, but also we don't expect any return of significant offshore winds at this time. And so we'll continue to monitor that, of course, and communicate any changes as needed on our public website, pgne.com/weather. Gives you kind of the insight into what we're seeing on the weather. And so I encourage you all to check out that page. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Lindsay.
Thanks, Scott. Couple of follow-up questions. Do you know at this hour how many of the counties have been given weather all clears at this point?
Yeah, so with this event affected a large number of counties just because of how widespread it is. I believe the majority of those counties have been given either full all clears or partial all clears. There were some areas where we got very specific on the circuits that we're still concerned with the second round of winds overnight. So I believe that most counties, there's maybe one or two that haven't been given some form of all clear, whether full or partial.
Okay. And then I don't know if this is a question for you or better answered by Mark when we talk to him, but one of the frustrations that we hear from people during these events is that even though we're recording these really high winds in some areas, other areas where people are experiencing power outage, they may not see those types of wind speeds in their areas. And so they're confused as to why the power's out in their area. Is that something you can address?
Yeah, I can take a run at that, and then Mark can chime in. And so essentially, the grid, I kind of think about the electrical grid kind of working like, the plumbing in your house. You have the ability to turn it off, when it goes to the street to when it goes inside your house. And if the dangerous fire conditions occur, kind of upstream of where you may be served, you may be impacted by that public safety power shutoff. So as the wind's kind of running, or as the lines are running over some of the, more dangerous country in our territory, that may be the area of focus for the public safety power shutoff. So we might need to focus the PSPS on that location, but down the hill or in a microclimate down in a canyon, for example, where the winds may not be as strong, you may still be impacted by that public safety power shutoff if you lose your source upstream, whether that's transmission or distribution.
So it's because of the interconnectedness of the grid.
That's a much simpler way to say it. Yes.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. And we'll let Mark add to that in just a moment. We do want to turn to Mark now and get an update on this current PSPS operation and what we're doing as far as restoration and what we're planning as we go into overnight and into tomorrow. So let's bring in Mark Quinlan now.
Thank you, Lindsay, and good evening, everybody. I want to start off by acknowledging how challenging of a fire season we've had in 2020. And that comes on top of all of the other challenges that we're facing as a society with the pandemic and working from home and schooling from home. And, when the power goes out, we understand that's a hardship, especially with all the challenges that I just mentioned. That's why we put a lot of effort into trying to make these public safety power shutoff events as small as we can. And then when we do have to execute them, due to the fire safety concerns, we make every effort we can to make them as short as possible, and then we try to take care of as many customers as we can who are out of service by making them smart and providing resources. So just want to acknowledge that right off the top. We've been successful in making the event smaller. You'll recall when we originally saw this event come on the radar screen, this event was more in the neighborhood of 466,000 customer accounts, and we've been able, through a number of different ways, to reduce it down to roughly 345,000 customers who were out of service last night and throughout the afternoon yesterday. So as Scott mentioned with the counties, we've made some really good progress today with respect to monitoring the weather and declaring the all clear. That's the first step of the restoration process. Unable to do any restoration work until it's safe to do so from a wind and fuel perspective. So 34 counties impacted by this event, 32 of them have received some form of all clear in whole or in part. And that's just great. And a lot of them came in a little earlier than anticipated. Some of these counties that came into an all clear status today were not anticipated to become all clear until tomorrow. So we're very happy with that because it allows us to get to work and get your lights back on. So here's how we look right now as of this time. Roughly 345,000 customer accounts impacted, restored as of the start of this briefing, nearly 100,000. 250,000 roughly remain. We're trying to drive that down and to get that as close to 200 as we can. We still have a number of men and women in the field right now that are out there patrolling and restoring. We are running out of daylight, so we will be grounding the helicopter fleet. We will be deploying the airplane that we have that can see at night in some cases to continue the effort. But the patrols will continue on ground and on foot where it's safe to do so. So the numbers as they sit right now as of the briefing is 28% customers restored. I would anticipate that number rising over the next few hours. The next slide, we'll get into some details of what we're doing and how we're driving those numbers down. So I mentioned the air fleet. And, patrolling via air is the most effective way, the most efficient way to patrol. Number one, we could cover thousands of miles so much faster via air and be able to, hop from line to line, circuit for circuit, in a helicopter or in a plane as compared to driving these roads out. Some cases we have to do that if we can't get to the infrastructure. But the air fleet is really critical here, and we have a pretty sizable air fleet, 65 helicopters. All of them were in the air today doing those patrols and restoration activities. And as mentioned, we do have that one fixed wing aircraft that has the high resolution camera and infrared technology that allows us to see some of our assets at night. We use that primarily on our transmission system, and it was effective. All of those aerial resources are complemented by a sizable ground force that's on the ground in the field doing the work. At least 1,800 men and women out there in the field, and they are backed up by a sizable workforce in our emergency centers in our regions and the counties, as well as in the emergency operations center. So a lot of resources applied to this event, again, to make it as smaller and shorter as possible. Next slide, please. We have already started to receive damage cases, 12 so far. Doesn't sound like a big number. It will be as time continues. We expect to receive many more damage cases this evening as the crews are clearing off the work. And then when we continue our work tomorrow, we anticipate those numbers rising. Just to refresh, when we shut the power off, we have to inspect it to ensure that it is safe prior to turning it back on, because we often find damage cases. You're looking at two pictures on the slide here of examples that we found today. It might be a little bit difficult to see, but the case on the left involves a tree that fell into our lines and knocked our primary lines down. Those are our high voltage distribution lines that carry the power from the substation out to your neighborhoods along the main roads and in the neighborhoods. The picture on the right is another vegetation-related outages. Very difficult to see, but there's a secondary wire that's in there. That's the wire that goes from the pole to your actual house, to your meter, into your service panel. So we're seeing problems on both the high voltage distribution system as well as on the secondary system. And as mentioned, we do expect to receive many more of these damage cases overnight. It's important to note and to remember, any one of these damage cases could result in a spark or an arc flash event. And if that happens with those high winds, it could cause an ignition, and an ignition that would be very difficult to control. It could result in spotting, rapid spread. That is one of the fundamental concepts of public safety power shutoff, is to prevent that from happening. And so we do see the damage. The damages are reviewed to ensure that they indeed could have caused that type of event. And then we record that and learn from that, because we also mark geographically where these damage cases occurred, and we feed that back into Scott's team in the meteorology department, and it helps inform our model and make it more smart. We can compare wind speeds and see when we saw damages like this occur, and help train the model to be even more accurate and continue to progress the program. Next slide, we'll talk a little bit about, again, making the event smaller. So I mentioned the 466,000 customer accounts to begin with, and where we landed up and where we stand. On the left-hand side, 200,000 customers reduced through a number of different means. Every PSPS event starts with weather. If there's no high winds, there's no PSPS event. So it starts with weather, and one of the big ways that we reduce scope in comparison to previous years is just by increased meteorology capability through the tools and technology that we now have this year. It allows us to really focus in and be very surgical as to where we believe those highest areas of risk are. So we do that to begin with, and then once we have that scope, there are still instances, to Lindsay's original question off the top, about customers that may be out of service, aren't experiencing winds because the electric system passes through that surgical area, and we try to make the impact of that outage smaller by a number of different ways. The biggest impacts are through islanding on our system. That we have 2 islands that we set up during this event, and avoided 70 to 80,000 customers by doing that. It allows us to take those high voltage lines out of service and allows all of the customers to remain in lights because we placed it on in its own island configuration. The other main ways are through temporary generation. We refer to that as microgrids. There's a couple of different types. 8 of them that we deployed during this event. About half of them in substations and the other half of them out in communities. Now, the ones you might see in the communities are called mid-feeder microgrids, and they're really designed to be able to keep Main Street or downtown areas energized, critical businesses like gas stations, grocery stores, places where people could go who may be out of service where they live, be able to come in and get the appropriate resources they need to be safe. And then the final way that we make the event smaller, again, it's a play off weather. Once we have the scope and we understand that it's just this area, it's all about being able to sectionalize our transmission and distribution system to match it up as best as we can to that actual risk zone. And we do that by using sectionalizing devices. 163 were used in this event scope, installed over 600 of these devices over the last year to give us that operational flexibility. Let's go to our final slide. And with that, before I turn it back to Lindsay, Vanessa will cover some of the ways that I mentioned that when you are out, how we try to provide as many resources as we can. This is one example of that. But I do want to say, we understand the hardship, clearly. Our friends and families, and we are impacted by these events as well. But we're doing everything we can to reduce the threat of catastrophic wildfires. The conditions are very, very unsafe with respect to wildfire risk right now, which is why we executed the program out of just a care for public safety. We take it extremely seriously. So with that, Lindsay, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, Mark, thanks very much for that update. Really appreciate it. And so as Mark said, we're going to bring in Vanessa Bryan now. She's with our local customer experience team to talk to us a little bit about the community resource centers and the other services that are available for our customers who are going through the PSPS event right now. Vanessa.
Thank you, Lindsay, and hello, everyone. As we enter the second night of the shutoff, for many of you, our customers, I'm going to focus really on ways we're working to make this experience less difficult for you. So as Mark mentioned, we have community resource centers. We opened 106 of them throughout the affected areas to support you, our customers, during this event. As of this evening, we have 99 that remain open, and we've seen nearly 13,000 attendees come to those community resource centers. Now, they'll stay open tonight until 10 p.m., and they'll open again tomorrow at 8 a.m. in the areas that are still impacted. They'll stay open until nearly all customers in that area are restored. So you can visit our website for the latest on center hours and locations. When you visit the centers, customers will find charging for medical and personal devices. There's restrooms, water, light snacks, and blankets if needed. We know it's getting cool out, so the indoor centers will offer air conditioning or heating as appropriate, and all of these centers reflect appropriate COVID-19 health considerations. That includes physical distancing, temperature checks administered before entering any indoor facility, and regular sanitation of surfaces. Staff at the centers will be wearing facial coverings, and we do request that our attendees do so as well. So in addition, we're continuing to communicate directly with affected customers. We keep you updated about when we receive that all clear that Mark talked about, and we can begin patrolling. And then as the patrols occur and we have an updated estimated time that we'll be able to restore power, we send another communication to our customers. Finally, you'll receive a communication once power has been restored. We know some folks leave their homes and want to know when they can go back. So you can expect to receive those communications throughout this evening and into tomorrow. We've also taken extra precautions for our customers who rely on power for medical needs and that are enrolled in our medical baseline program. So these customers are asked to confirm that they've received the PSPS notifications. Even after power is shut off, we continue to do wellness calls for these individuals, and we've been able to confirm that 98% of the customers received our message, and those are the customers in our medical baseline program. I also want to note that our website is updated with the latest information and really the best source for PSPS event-specific information. And our call centers are staffed and they're actively responding to your calls with an average wait time of only 5 seconds for PSPS-related calls. So additional support for our customers with medical, accessibility, financial, language, and aging needs is available. And for this event, we're partnering with 55 community-based organizations that cover these efforts. This includes our partnership with the California Foundation for Independent Living Centers to provide portable backup batteries, hotel stays, food stipends, and accessible transportation for qualifying customers. Now you can see a full list of participating independent living centers, their disability, disaster, access, and resource centers, and they're listed on our pge.com/disability and aging page. I also want to encourage folks to remember that 211 is a great resource to learn about all available support services that are in your county during any disaster. And finally, we're partnering with food banks and Meals on Wheels to provide food replacement options. Customers in impacted areas who are enrolled in Meals on Wheels are receiving an additional meal throughout the duration of the PSPS event. And customers who experience food loss can go to participating food banks for food replacement. For this event, we have partnerships in 32 of the impacted counties. And you can find a list of all of the food banks, Meals on Wheels, and other resources that are available to our customers, again, at that pge.com/disability and aging page. So in closing, we want to thank you for your patience and your understanding with this public safety power shutoff. We hope these resources can help ease the burden of losing power and reduce the hardship where we can. And we remain focused on supporting you, our customers, while also reducing wildfire risk. Back to you, Lindsay.
All right, Vanessa, thanks very much. We do have some reporters on the line with us tonight. We want to give them a chance to ask a couple of questions. I want to go first to, actually I want to remind the reporters first, you need to hit *1 to get into the queue to ask a question. So the first reporter that we have in the queue tonight is with KPIX TV out of the Bay Area, and that's Joe Vasquez. Joe, do you have 2 questions for our experts tonight?
I do. The first one, to what degree did the PSPS work to directly stave off any fires? In other words, were there any examples of downed power lines that perhaps would have energized, if they'd been energized, would have possibly started a fire?
Okay, and then do you have a second question too?
Yeah, the second question is, I see over here at Highway 12 and Oakmont in Santa Rosa, a whole bunch of PG&E trucks, and I'm trying to figure out exactly what their job is.
Okay, let's start with Mark Quinlan. Mark, Joe was asking about, any evidence that we can show that we maybe prevented a fire here. And I think earlier you talked about damage reports. Can you talk a little bit more about the process of going out and inspecting the lines and what we found so far? And then Joe, we may have to get back to you after this call on the Highway 12 in Santa Rosa. I don't know that Mark will have that information. So if he doesn't, we'll get back to you after the briefing. But Mark, let's talk a little bit about that. What are we finding? You might be on mute, Mark. You're imitating me.
Got you. Thank you for that.
Thanks.
So Joe, great questions. The first one was, do we believe PSPS actually, what role did it have in prevention of fires? Has a big role. In my remarks, you saw the damage cases that we found so far and the photographs that we had. The one on the left, absolutely, a primary conductor down on the ground causes an arc flash event. And an arc flash event sparks, a big flash, could be an ignition, and in those winds, very, very challenging to control. And once the fire could, propagate, become larger, it's just a big challenge. And that's really the purpose of the program. We're going back on the slide deck here. That I'm referring to the picture on the left. which is 12,000 volt lines that are down because of vegetation contact. As I mentioned, we have to patrol every mile of line that's in the event scope. We do that every single time. We find damages every single time. So I have a high degree of confidence that the actions are producing the results, and the results are prevention of, catastrophic wildfires. With respect to your second question about the PG&E crews getting together, that's likely part of our restoration process. What we do once we begin to patrol and restore, once we get that weather all clear, the field teams are all out in strategic locations near the shutoff zones, where we have a task force lead that's in charge of just one distribution circuit or maybe two distribution circuits, and they have a whole team that goes out, and they're in charge of each individual segment of a circuit. And under those teams are the people that are patrolling. So it's a coordinated effort so that we have constant patrols by the patrollers being reported in as each segment is cleared. And as each segment is cleared, it comes back to the person in charge for the overall circuit. And once we get that all clear, then we get permission to re-energize from our control center. And that's when the lights come on. So what you're seeing out there is restoration in action, with folks coming back and reporting clear and getting new assignments for what remains off. Hope that answers your question.
All right, Mark, thanks very much. Want to remind the reporters again, you do need to hit *1 to get into the queue to ask a question. And I believe we have with KGO, Katie Larson with us this evening. Katie, are you on?
It's Kate, but hi, everyone. So I'm in Mill Valley. I just saw the lights go back on, which is great. Can you guys talk a little bit about the difference between last year and this year in terms of the PSPSs? I know that you talked about the grid a little bit and how folks who are downstream, Mill Valley, for example, might have their power shut off even though there's not wind. But my understanding is that you guys have also been able to be a lot more precise this year in terms of where you shut off power, and can you avoid a nursing home or some other critical facility not afford to lose power. And then can you also talk about, I know the fire danger is not over, but the wind event is, but are there any more PSPSs in Northern California, in the Bay Area region, expected in the near term?
All right, thanks, Kate. We're going to go first to Mark, who can talk to us a little bit about how PSPS events have changed from last year to this year, talking about the precision. And then after that, if we've still got Scott with us, I'd like you to talk to us about the longer range forecast. So Mark, let's start with you.
Thank you. Excellent, Kate. I appreciate you asking that question. We're doing a lot to make these events smaller. To your point, a lot of it is grid specific. But as mentioned, every PSPS event starts with weather. It's all about pinpointing the dry fuels and the high winds, right? And so once we do that, we have meteorology tools that allow us to be very, very surgical as to, where exactly the area is, and elevation comes into play there. A lot of different things. Wind direction comes into play there. Once we have that geographic area of scope that's reduced, there's other things that we try to do to match up our electric system that travels through it to just isolate it so it's only off in that certain section, right? So sometimes we can do that, and the devices, those sectionalizing devices, match up perfectly. Other times they don't. And when that happens and people are impacted, say down the road or down the street, we refer to it as downstream, of the impacted area, and they need that power in order to receive service outside of the risk area. That's where we apply those mitigation tactics. So if I can isolate the problem and keep it really specific to the geographic danger zone, I still have an opportunity to keep people energized or re-energized, keep their lights back on through a microgrid, through substation islanding, right? Those solutions that I kind of referenced. So although the event scope has reduced without a doubt from last year to this year, and that's an ongoing task that we look to make these things smaller and smaller. That work never stops. Even though that happens, you could still have that circumstance where customers outside of the danger zone are off, and what we try to do is solve for that. And so that's how we've made the events smaller. With respect to the PSPS events, are there any future events? I can tell you after talking to Scott, we're constantly looking at the weather. It have to be imperative during this time of the year and all times of the year, quite frankly, to be on alert with weather risks to the electric system, especially in fire season. Don't see anything in the next 5 to 6 days. I'll defer to Scott to talk about maybe how the next month or two looks, and I'm confident he's going to mention rain. Over to you, Scott.
Hey, Mark, before we go back to Scott, quick question to kind of wrap up Kate's first question. This particular event, had it been last year, would have been how much larger?
Early estimates, Lindsay, I would say maybe double. We've been looking, we've been measuring ourselves for the PSPS that we've been having this year so far in 2020 and comparing it to what our capabilities were last year. We've been seeing on average 50–60% reduction. So again, that's going in the right direction, but we have to continue to drive that because we recognize how much of a hardship it is. One customer that's out is too many. And so we just keep driving that down. But that would be my estimate at this time.
So that's through those mitigation measures that you outlined. Okay, thanks very much. Scott, let's go to you and see if we can get a little bit more detail on what you're seeing in the longer range forecast. Are you with us?
Yeah, sorry, I had issues coming off mute. The joys of working from home, as many are experiencing. So yeah, just to piggyback on what Mark said on the meteorology side, we made a lot of improvements. We worked with 2 external experts in numerical weather prediction to really refine our high resolution weather model that we run internally. And it's kind of the state-of-the-art model that's in use by other utilities, and we run it at a 2-kilometer resolution, and it doesn't sound like much, but we've essentially doubled that resolution from what we were using last year. And so that allows us to really pinpoint exactly where those high winds are expected to be forecast. And we have, some PhDs on my staff that are actually numerical weather prediction experts, and we're always working. This is a long-term continuous improvement project to just keep improving the weather forecast, because that's really what's driving a lot of public safety power shutoff here. And so that's kind of your first question. Your second question about rain and long-term. And so basically, after we get through tomorrow, we do have some wind tonight. We do expect to be able to issue all clears to close out this PSPS event by tomorrow. That's when all the red flag warnings that are posted from the National Weather Service also expire. They're expiring on Tuesday. And federal agencies, as well as us, we're not seeing anything for at least the next week. And then beyond there, it starts to become a little opaque, because the global weather forecast models, always struggle that far out, because we're dealing with fluid dynamics when it comes to weather and uncertainty. The Climate Prediction Center, though, does put out a forecast on the long-range projection of what we expect for winter. And unfortunately, right now, they say that there's more chance that we're going to be dry this winter, at least across central and southern California, than experience a wet winter. That's to be determined. I hope that is not the case, because I really want to get back into forecasting winter storms and snow, because we do a lot of work there trying to get crews prepared for storms in specific areas when it comes to winter storms, so that we can, when we do have a storm-related outage, not from wildfire, but from snow or rain or high winds with rain, we do a lot of work there to get crews, ready for that and prepared 365 days a year to get the lights on faster in those kind of situations. So hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, I think we're all hoping for some rain. Thanks, Scott. We may have one other reporter with us on the line tonight with Bay Area News Group. Maggie Angster, are you with us tonight? Operator, can we get Maggie on the line? Oh, we may have lost her. Okay, well, I do want to thank all of our customers who have been listening to our update tonight. I want to thank the media who did call in tonight, and then also our experts, Scott and Mark and Vanessa, for joining us. With that, again, just wanted to provide some resources for all of you where you can get more information. pge.com/PSPS updates, terrific resource to know what's going on up to the minute. You can also look at our social channels on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and also Nextdoor. So again, I want to thank our customers for your patience and your understanding as we work to keep our customers and our community